You never want a photo to look like this. No, it's not my ugly face in the image, but it's the grain in the picture. I will explain to you how to prevent that grain from ruining your photos. There is a camera setting called ISO. ISO has a role in controlling the brightness of your image. It's like a fake light. Simply put, the lower the ISO, the darker the image. The higher the ISO, the brighter the image. It does this by increasing your camera's sensitivity to light. High ISO is a handy tool to use when you're shooting indoors, at night, other low lighting conditions, or if you need a fast shutter to freeze the action. Low ISO is useful if you're shooting in harsh lighting conditions with a wide aperture, or if you need a slow shutter speed to show motion blur. But, this is a big but, so pay attention. This fake light comes with a nefarious trade-off that I wasn't aware of early on in my photography career. And as a result of that, it caused me to screw up one of the most magical images of my life, and I don't want you to make the same mistake. The higher your ISO gets, the grainier your image becomes. We call this grain digital noise. Digital noise is bad for our image for two reasons. One, as you can see, it doesn't look very good. Two, if you're printing out your photo or blowing it up on the big screen, the noise will become more and more apparent and it'll take away from the beauty of your subject. Depending on the type of camera, there will be different levels of ISO until you start to see noise in your image. For instance, my entry-level Canon M50, noise starts to get introduced at ISO 1600. But with my Canon R8, noise starts to become noticeable at 25,600. Even though you should always try to shoot at the lowest ISO possible, this does not mean you should lock your ISO at 100. Locking your ISO at 100 is a common beginner mistake that you should not make. Always keep in mind the visual effects you want to achieve in your image via shutter speed or aperture, and then adapt your ISO accordingly. Also, if you're shooting at low light conditions and you've already tried adjusting the shutter speed and aperture and still cannot expose the image properly, then it's worth pumping up the ISO even into the noise levels. Remember, it's always better to have a shot than no shot at all. Speaking of which, let's go look at some. Here at ISO 100, our image will be the most noise-free. And honestly, there isn't really much here to talk about. When I was scripting this video, my original plan was to go through every one of the major ISO levels up until we start seeing grain. But there wasn't really much of a difference between them. So instead of wasting your time, I'm just going to skip to ISO 25,600. If you look at the corners and the shadows, you'll start to see noticeable grain. It'll be more and more visible as we go up ISO levels. Here at ISO 51,200, the grain is most apparent in the whites and shadows of the image. Finally, in ISO 102,400, which is the highest level my Canon R8 can go to, and you can see how the image quality went flying out the window. The grain is absolutely horrendous, as if someone sandpapered your image. If you enjoyed learning photography, please subscribe so you can get updated when new free educational photography videos drop. My mission is to make learning photography as simple as possible without boring you with the hard technical details. Now that you've learned ISO, it's important to understand the other camera settings, aperture and shutter speed. I recommend you watch those videos next.